I'm Reverend Oli Preston from the Parish of St Peter's Halliwell in Bolton, sharing another of my favourite Bible verses with you. Today I want to share one of the shortest verses in the Bible, not because I'm lazy, but because I think it's a really beautiful picture of who Jesus is and what he's like. This verse is just 2 words, and it's from John chapter 11, verse 35. It simply says, Jesus wept. Now the proviso is it's worth reading the whole chapter because this is the story of Jesus going and finding that his friend Lazarus has died. And we see this whole story play out of him going, meeting Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, of Jesus being taken to the tomb. And here, after being moved with compassion, it says he was moved with compassion, and then he came to the tomb, saw where Lazarus' body was laid, and that Jesus wept. What I love about this is the humanity of it. We're just about to see Jesus' divinity, the fact that he is God, as he raises Lazarus from the dead. But before that, we see that Jesus is 100% human, as well as being 100% God. He's not exempt from the sadness and the hardship that we all go through. I love the image here of God's compassion. That God is not unmoved when God with skin on comes and finds one of his friends dead, his sisters in mourning. He is full of grief. I think this is a powerful reassurance that for me and as others, as we experience grief and sadness and loss, God isn't abstract somewhere far above, unmoved, untouched. This for me shows something that I believe to be true, that when we weep, God is with us and God weeps with us. I've found that a great reassurance in my life when I've had times of real grief. It doesn't fix it, but it does mean that God is not far away, that I'm not cut off from God by my grief. To know that Jesus wept, to know that God knows what it is to be deeply sad. And that as I see Jesus, my King, my Lord, weeping, that gives me permission to weep. As a British man, I think I'm probably sometimes not particularly well in touch with my emotions. Our society sometimes finds the strength of grief hard to handle. We don't do it a lot. We're not big on showing emotion, not in the UK. And sometimes, sadness and grief are not pleasant feelings. They don't feel nice to feel. It can feel quite vulnerable. It can feel a bit out of control at times to be weeping, to be that filled with grief that it doesn't describe the picture firmly, but when it says Jesus wept, I imagine his body shaking, big, wet tears everywhere, every part of him filled with this. It can feel overwhelming. But when we're hurt or bereaved in any way, it's totally human to grieve. It's part of our emotional landscape. I heard a psychologist recently say that although grief and sadness might not be pleasant to feel, sometimes, often, embracing that grief, allowing it to be, can be the start of healing. And in this story, we see that totally, that Jesus goes on from his grief and isn't incapacitated by it. He isn't numbed by it, but he experiences this overwhelming grief. He weeps at his friend's tomb, and from there he moves into action, and we find hope. That faith and grief are not separate things, that they can stand together, that I can trust God wholeheartedly and yet still come to him with my grief and be totally honest about that. I think at the moment we've got a lot to weep for. All of us, everyone in the world near enough, has experienced some hardship over the last few weeks. Many people have been really ill. Many people have lost loved ones. All of us have had our lives curtailed. We've had our freedoms cut back. We've been separated from our family, our friends. Life has been hard. There's been a lot that we might want to weep for. And that's okay. At times in the last few weeks I have felt fed up and frustrated. At times I felt fine, and at times I felt just really sad. And this text I love because it shows me a wonderful example of the humanity, of the compassion, and of the vulnerability in this moment that this verse captures so simply and yet so profoundly, that Jesus wept. I offer that to you as a favourite Bible verse. God bless you.